I've personally tore down more than 100 different standing desks to their components, tested for stability, and validated other specs like speed, capacity, and range. Recently, the Wirecutter picked the Branch Duo standing desk because of how compact in size it is. With a footprint as small as 24 inches deep and 36 inches wide, they say this will fit into places that the Uplift desk and Fully Jarvis cannot. But is this desk as stable? Can it lift as much? And is the desk overall as nice as those other picks from Wirecutter? Let's find out. I know that you probably care a lot about how easily these desks go together, whether it's because of a lack of mechanical skills, or maybe tools, or even the fact that you just plan to move a few times. So I guess if it goes together easily, it likely means taking it apart should be the same. Now, when I first unboxed the top for the Branch Duo desk, I was super disappointed that there were some surface scratches on the top and the bottom. But for now, we'll just chalk this up to shipping, since we would assume this was new when it left their facility. Now, I could tell right away this desk was made by Jiakang, the same factory that produces the Uplift desk and Fully desk. But it is super important that we consider there are definitely different levels to the products that Jiakang manufactures. To hit certain price points, you'll see differences throughout to save money, and that was definitely the case here with the Duo desk. The Surface used threaded inserts for the frame and pre-drilled holes for everything else. Now, this is good for disassembly, especially if you plan to disassemble when you're moving. The only issue here is if you're one of the people I mentioned with a lack of tools. They included a tiny Allen wrench with one end as a screwdriver. Do not use this unless you absolutely hate yourself. Now, I was able to get the desk together in about 40 minutes using their tools until I finally caved and swapped for a real screwdriver. Sorry, but honestly, I would have probably cut out about 15 minutes with an actual screwdriver. If you're still stuck on what standing desk to buy, download our standing desk cheat sheet linked in the description. In the specs and features sections of my reviews, I like to talk about what the brand lists for each area of their desk, and later in the video, we'll actually test to verify if these are accurate. Now, the Duo features a smart paddle for an up and down button. This allows you to easily move the desk by pulling or pushing down on the paddle. To use the sitting and standing presets, simply double tap the switch up or down to activate. There's also an additional feature with the switch that includes a locking of the paddle for safety purposes with kids. Now, if you need reminders to stand up, there's a feature within the switch that does this as well. Last, you can also set container stops, aka a min and max height, if you want the desk to operate within those constraints. Branch lists that the lifting capacity is 275 pounds. Now, both the Fully and Uplift desk boast a capacity north of 350 pounds, but I'm not sure there's enough room even on the Duo to maximize this weight unless you decide to lift bricks throughout the day. Branch also claims that their height adjustment speed is 1.3 inches per second, which is about 0.2 inches per second slower than the other brands. The height adjustment range on the Duo wasn't ideal in my opinion, with a range from 28 to 48 inches tall. When using ergonomic calculators, most will tell you that users around that 6 foot are best for a sitting height of 28 inches tall. You would likely want to add a footrest to sit at that correct height if you're shorter than this. Now, the max height of 48 inches, on the other hand, is good for users up to 6'2". So the average height of the population won't technically fit this desk, except maybe if we're looking at standing-only heights. Overall, when looking at the fit and the finish of the frame from Duo, I liked what I saw. Now, I think that their OEM has really upped their game in this department, and their frames look very well done as well. The color that I chose for the review was also a nice change up from that typical black, silver, or white frame. While the frame looked nice, there were some significant differences between it and the other products from Fully and Uplift. First, the columns are fairly narrow. They definitely look more like a home use versus a commercial grade product from Wirecutter's other picks. Now, maybe this was intentional or maybe it was a cost thing. Also, when you look at how the frame itself was put together, you may or may not have noticed that the upper supports don't actually connect to each other in the middle. Now, this, in my opinion, is a cost-saving solution. The upper cross supports definitely help with stability and will prevent bowing on the surface with the more weight that's added to it. If you decide to get the 48-inch wide, I'm not really a huge fan of this design, especially because we're stretching out the width of the surface with no real support. It's likely to bow. They also used a quick connect system with small screws that connect the columns, also known as the legs, to the upper supports. Because of the thickness of the steel at this connection, it isn't very robust and almost certain to create additional stability issues. Speaking of stability issues, what happened to the foot? The Uplift desk features a cast aluminum foot that's solid, and the Jarvis a heavy-duty steel-formed foot. On the Duo, you get a much less robust foot design, which again, this has to be due to costs in my opinion. The surface was on par when it comes to the thickness of the top itself being 1 inch thick, but again, I see an opportunity for improvement here. Not using the typical 3mm edge banding to sort of soften those edges definitely led to a sharper edge, which I think could be a problem for some of those of us who like to rest our forearms on the surface. After opening up the columns to kind of get a better idea what's inside there, especially the glides, they really looked very similar to what I've seen on the Uplift and Jarvis desk. And this has been happening now for a while. You can see the white lubricant that's being used to help the columns move up and down easily. The gears and motors were similar to what we've seen in other Jarvis 2-stage limited height options as well. The only difference really being the size of the motor. It was a bit smaller, and the worm gear, which is at the end of the motor, was a bit shorter as well. Now, the one thing that was sort of interesting to me is the use of a much cheaper packaging type foam used to sort of hold the motors and reduce vibrations than the more dense alternative in the Fully and Uplift. I have to think I know why. Looking inside the control box, you couldn't really tell a difference between the Uplift and Branch control box. Same can be said for the Jarvis as well. So how did the Duo hold up to the rest of our testing, especially now knowing the difference in the build compared to those other desks in Wirecutter's list? The easiest thing to test is of course the overall height adjustment, and there were no issues here as it hit the 28 inches on the low end and maxed out at 48 inches tall. Now, I like to combine the speed and capacity testing. I always want to verify if the product can actually lift what the brand advertises and how much the speed will drop as you near max capacity. Because the Branch Duo had the same control box and very similar motors, I had no concern that it would perform. It hit right on the 1.3 inches per second mark throughout all the testing with all of the weights up to max capacity, and I was even able to overload this desk and to continue lifting heavier loads. Of course, I wouldn't recommend this. Now, the only time the speed dropped is when we cycled the desk up and down too many times and was likely due to overheating. Then the speed would drop in about half, which was honestly the first time I've actually seen this from a standing desk. And if this is true, I think this is a pretty cool feature since you won't have to wait for that control box to completely cool down to get to using your desk again, especially if it were to shut off somewhere in between sitting and standing. Now, testing the stability of the Duo, we definitely found this to be the chink in the armor. Even with the column fit not being an issue, the lack of substance in the frame, including no upper cross support and feet that just weren't as rigid as something you'd see, created issues. Now at just 35 inches, you can actually start to see some movement. Still pretty stable, but you'd like to see that this was actually this at about 42 to 43 inches. But by the time it got to the 42-inch range, you can see that it's gotten much worse. By the time you're at about 45, it's pretty bad at that point. Overall, I kind of scratched my head with this pick. When comparing it to the alternatives, Wirecutter's ranked ahead of it. The Uplift desk is available in a 24-inch deep by 42-inch wide configuration, which gets you close in size and far ahead in everything else. Thanks for watching.